Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm really excited to have my client Andrew here today. And it's fun because he actually found me through the podcast. So now it's coming full circle for him to talk on here about, how he was sleeping before and what his experience has been working together and how he's sleeping now. I really want to inspire you with some client success stories so that you know that this is fixable as well. So if you can't sleep, this is a problem that we can totally fix. It's just a matter of finding out why and getting to the root cause of that. So thanks so much for being here today, Andrew.
Hi, great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about my experience today.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for sure. So, yeah, I wanted to start with, how you were sleeping when we talked. I think it was last December. And where were you at that point?
Well, I wasn't in a good place, that's for sure. So I've had trouble sleeping for quite a while, probably since I was a teenager. I think it first became a problem when I was about 14 years old. But I was in a place where it was kind of manageable, and I understood that I had trouble sleeping, and I made workarounds to in order to mitigate that problem. But starting about a year ago, I suddenly noticed that my sleep deteriorated even more than it had in the past. And I was noticing that I was having a lot of nights where I was only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Ordinarily, prior to that, if I had a bad night of sleep, it would probably be about 5 hours of sleep. So there was a very noticeable slip in my sleep quality. And typically, it manifested itself in me going to bed, having absolutely no trouble falling asleep, and then waking up 2.5 to 4 hours later and being awake for either a really long time afterwards, or in some cases the entire night afterwards. And it was impacting a lot of different facets of my life. I noticed I was becoming more irritable. I wasn't as happy. I was kind of paranoid about my sleep, so I was thinking about my sleep throughout the day when I could have been focusing on any number of other things that were more important to my life. Not that sleep isn't important, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it was just I was in a bad place, and I started looking at podcasts that addressed insomnia, and I came across your podcast, and I was really intrigued by it because it was addressing things that a lot of the other podcasts weren't. Most of them only focused on the psychological aspect to sleep, and yours brought in a lot of other elements. And I was really interested, and I reached out to you. At first, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to take your services or not, but then I eventually decided that it was a good idea, and I haven't regretted it since.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you remember, because we ran, the lab tests that I run, do you remember kind of what those showed for you and what stuck out for you?
Well, I can remember what stuck out to me. For certain, the cortisol results were really bizarre. I it looked as though my energy levels were declining throughout the day, and then suddenly kicking into high gear just a couple of hours before I would have gone to bed, probably around 8 p.m. or so. And I remember that sticking out as being something that was concerning. I remember a lot of my food sensitivity results being worrisome too. A lot of red flags were popping up. A lot of foods that I really enjoyed consuming were flagged as sensitivities for me. I live in Minnesota. Many listeners can probably tell by the accent that I'm somewhere in the upper Midwest. I consume a lot of dairy, or at least I did, and that was something that I discovered I had a sensitivity to. Gluten was another food item that popped up. Peanut butter, eggs. Uh, there was another one too, but those were the main ones. And yeah, I mean that was a big adjustment for me, certainly, making some of those dietary changes. I don't know, was there another result that you wanted to bring up?
No, I mean, I think those were definitely the big ones for you. I mean,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, the high cortisol at night totally explains why you're having a hard time sleeping. And
Mhm.
but that's not the case for all of my clients. So,
Mhm.
but it is for about half. So yeah, so it totally makes sense why you weren't sleeping. And then so the foods you're eating, pathogens in the gut, because you did have H. pylori at some level, and then high
Yeah.
candida.
Mhm.
So those can cause that high cortisol at night, and some liver dysfunction as well, which most of my clients tend to have too. So yeah, I think it
Mhm.
was that perfect storm of all of those things combined causing the high cortisol. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had a lot of different issues working in conjunction. And something that I remember too is that there were two separate sensitivity tests that you had me take, if I remember correctly. And on one of them, my gluten sensitivity wasn't all that high, and that was the more normal test to take. But then you took a subsequent test that showed very high sensitivity to gluten, higher than you had seen in almost any of your other clients, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So the basic food sensitivity tests that I used to run, I'm actually not doing that anymore because it does miss gluten sensitivity so often. So yeah, that one
Mm,
didn't show. But then the GI map, so that gut health test, has a marker for gluten sensitivity that was very high for you. So yeah, so that's why it's nice to have both of those in combination, to
yeah,
really be able to tell. Yeah. Yeah,
for
but you
sure.
embraced making all those changes, which was awesome. I know it's not an easy thing to do if you're used to eating a certain way to make those drastic changes to your diet, but you definitely did. And I think it made a big difference, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that your listeners would want to know is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's very difficult to make the adjustment at first, especially because, as I said, a lot of the things that were coming up on my food sensitivity test were foods that I consumed more than any others. So cutting out, eggs in particular, and dairy, and things along those lines, that was a big adjustment. But I started noticing uh, I started noticing that my stomach wasn't as upset after only a couple of days. That was probably the first thing that I noticed, even before my sleep began to improve. The sleep improvement quality comes a bit later. I would say you have to stick with it for 2 or 3 weeks before you really start to notice a difference. And then at some point or another, you just realize that you don't really need to worry about being able to stay asleep or fall asleep, and that it comes, pretty naturally. And honestly, even though I was expecting that it was going to have a significant impact, um, the the impact that it had was even greater than I imagined.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome. Yeah. I mean, your sleep improved pretty quickly, within a
mhm,
month or so. And
yeah,
you did that trip and said that you were so surprised that you slept well during the trip.
yeah, I was pretty used to the idea before, but before I started making those changes, I was pretty used to the idea that if I went on a vacation, I wasn't going to sleep well because I was going to be in a different location and there's going to be more variability in when I went to sleep. Usually the quality of the food I was eating probably wasn't very good too, which now I know probably made a difference. But yeah, I went on a trip to Yellowstone with my wife just a couple of days before it got flooded out, and I was surprised to learn that I slept well every single night of that trip. And we were in different Airbnbs, we were in different cabins, we were all over the place, sleeping in different locations and at different times. And ordinarily, that would have meant that I would have slept at best maybe 6 hours a night, and probably more likely 4 or 5 hours each night. You know, uh, at least for the first few days. And yeah, every single night of that trip, I slept between 6.5 and 8 hours. So it was great.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so that's how you're sleeping most of the time now, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Um, yeah, and that was something interesting too, because I think that when I first approached you, I said that I probably thought that I needed 6.5 hours of sleep. And what I've discovered is that when I just let my body do the work for me, and I go to bed at the time that my body tells me, and wake up when my body wants me to wake up. Actually, I sleep more like 7 hours a night, which is pretty normal. And that's actually been something that kind of surprised me.
Great.
I,
Yeah.
I yeah, once my body got the sleep that it needed for a period of time, I noticed that I was actually sleeping a little bit more than I even thought I needed.
Yeah. But it's interesting too, because so many people think that they need 8 hours, like that's a magic number. And I mean, the recommended range is between 7 and 9. So it's going to be different for everyone. But if you're waking up feeling rested and, feeling good, then that is a perfect amount of sleep for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good test of how much sleep you probably need. I don't know if you agree with this, but I would say that however it is that you sleep on the weekends when you're not setting an alarm or anything, that's probably a good test. I have today off from work. I went to bed at, I think, 10:15 p.m. I woke up at like 5:50 a.m. During that night, I woke up once to use the restroom for like 15-20 minutes, and I slept basically the rest of the night. So I mean, if you do the calculations, I probably got a little more than 7 hours of sleep, and that was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. How you sleep on vacation, how you sleep on the weekends when you're not setting an alarm is how
Hmm.
much your body needs. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else has changed since you're sleeping better?
Well, I definitely feel like I have a lot more energy. I also have more time during the day too. That's
Hmm.
something that I really like, because I didn't really mention this before, but when I was when I had that period of time where I was kind of managing the fact that I had insomnia, I would plan out that I would be in bed for about 9 hours a night to get 7 hours of sleep, which is very inefficient. And I was doing that even throughout law school, which oftentimes I just didn't really have time to plan out 9 hours to be in bed. So
Right.
it'd be a lot less than that, and I would get a lot less sleep. But but now I can reasonably expect that if I'm in bed for 8 hours, I, will get, more than 7 hours of sleep. And that's including time to fall asleep. That's including any time I might wake up in the middle of the night. And having a higher sleep efficiency means that I have more time during the day to do whatever it is I need to get done. And that's something that makes a huge difference
Yeah, that's
too.
awesome. Yeah. And I know you mentioned at the beginning how you spend a lot of time thinking about sleep and kind of being worried about it. So I would
Mhm.
imagine that's changed since you're
Yeah,
sleeping better.
yeah, for sure. It's not something that's on the top of my mind
Yeah.
during the day, which was something that I experienced for a very long time in my life. I mean, even going back to high school, I would be kind of worried about the amount of sleep I was going to get that night, especially if I had a big exam the next day. And that's just not healthy, not only in a physical sense, but psychologically, that's not healthy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people who sleep well, they don't think about sleep until they're about to go to sleep, you know?
Right, exactly.
So
Yeah,
like you said before, like, yeah, you can think about other kind of more important things and worrying about sleep during the day. So yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely one of the goals, I want to help all my clients with, no matter what, is yeah, changing those thoughts and worry about sleep as well. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
oh boy. um not really, except to just say, as I said earlier, that a lot of the changes that you recommend are big adjustments, and at first they're not a lot of fun, but they're worth it.
Awesome.
Your sleep is worth making those sorts of changes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I guess every person has to decide that for themselves, and the ones who get better, make the decision that, that this
Exactly.
is worth it. So, because I've had to make the same decision too. I'm gluten and dairy free as well. Probably for
Hmm.
life for me, and that's fine with me because I'd rather sleep.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, awesome. Well, I thank you so much for coming on here and telling everyone about your experience. It's really inspiring. So, thanks so much.
Of course, it was great to be on here.
Awesome, Andrew. Thank you.